In a dark forest in Ireland, a man runs terrified, repeatedly encountering signs that read, "Point of no return," with directions and distances. Unable to escape, he is quickly enveloped by darkness. A flock of birds flies overhead as he suddenly falls into a pit. An invisible force grabs him and drags him away. Elsewhere in the country, Mina, an artist, works at a pet store. One day, her boss asks her to transport a rare parrot to a zoo in a neighboring town. Mina agrees, takes the bird home, and confides in it about her mother's death 15 years prior. Unexpectedly, the parrot reacts strongly. That evening, Mina dons a wig and goes to a bar, introducing herself under a fake name and claiming to be a ballerina. The next morning, she apologizes to the parrot, explaining that her real self might not be likable. Their journey begins, and along the way, Mina's sister Lucy calls, reminding her that she has a loving family and nieces waiting for her. Mina drives on, eventually taking a road leading into an old dark forest. Her car breaks down, and with no cell signal, she takes the parrot to look for help. The forest is dark and desolate, and when she returns to where she left the car, it's gone. Lost in the swiftly darkening landscape, she talks to the parrot to keep her spirits up, naming it Darwin. Suddenly, she sees a woman running past and decides to follow her. Mina catches up with her near a small forest cabin, where the woman opens the door and tells her to come in immediately if she wants to survive. Mina hesitates only briefly before entering. The elderly woman, named Madeline, has been living in the cabin with two young people, CR and Daniel. She immediately instructs Mina to stand in front of a mirror because watchers can observe but not enter, and they come every night after sunset. Mina hears applause. Madeline confirms that the watchers applaud the arrival of a new entity. The next morning, Mina expresses a desire to leave, but the others explain that it's impossible. She heads into the forest, and Madeline catches up to her, explaining that the forest causes hallucinations, but survival here is possible by adhering to certain rules. The signs in the forest guide people to reach the cabin before nightfall. If they don't return in time, there's no way back. A man called the Professor created the signs, but no one knows his current whereabouts. That night, Daniel performs a show for the Watchers, introducing Mina to them, but the Watchers insist he act as usual. Meanwhile, CR plays music and dances, as she does every night. Mina finds DVDs of romantic TV shows and watches them. The next morning, she and CR gather medicinal herbs, as Daniel has been taking care of CR ever since her husband disappeared while searching for a way out of the forest. Recently, strange nests have been found scattered throughout the forest, and CR suspects that the Watchers visit them during the day. She believes she has been in the cabin for almost 5 months. Later, Madeline explains the safety rules. Never go outside at night, never open the door, and always stay in the light. Mina begins to live through a series of strangely identical days, watching endless reality shows and frequently looking at the mirror. One day, she knocks on the mirror, and immediately afterward, there is a knock on the door. Madeline commands everyone to freeze, and everything becomes still. The next day, Mina goes hunting with Daniel, who tells her that Madeline used to work at a university and considers herself knowledgeable. She was the first to live in the cabin. Daniel himself has been there for 8 months, but hasn't seen anyone else. After listening to Daniel, Mina persuades him to help her descend into a hollow. Inside, she finds old items, newspapers, toys, electronics, and a bicycle. She ties them to a rope to be pulled up, but hears strange noises similar to those she hears in the cabin at night. Panicking, she climbs back up and examines the items calmly. She thinks the bicycle might be a way to escape, but Madeline reacts oddly to the idea. Meanwhile, Daniel sets up a surveillance system with the electronics he found, placing a camera by the door. That night, everything seems normal as CR dances, but the door is knocked upon. Daniel alerts them, but Madeline forbids anyone to open it. They hear CR's husband, John, calling for them, and CR tries to confirm his identity by asking which book he was reading. When he doesn't respond, only begging for help, CR approaches the camera to look, but sees something drag John into the forest. Immediately, something pounds on the mirror harder than ever, and Madeline steps in front as if to protect them, calming the noises. The next morning, Madeline throws the bicycle into the hollow, warning them not to break any rules. She recalls a childhood memory of a sunny day with her sister and mother. Her mother asked her to close the window against the wind, but when she didn't, a tragic event occurred. Winter arrives, shortening the days, chilling the nights, and depleting their food supplies, heightening tensions among the cabin residents. One day, CR goes into the forest, and Mina catches up to her. She confesses that she believes John was real. When they hear Daniel scream, they rush back to the cabin, only to be refused entry. They hide under a tree, watching a terrifying spider-like creature with high-pitched sounds approach the cabin window. As Daniel and CR look on, Mina and Madeline wait for the creatures, the Watchers, to leave before begging to be let inside. After being denied by Daniel, Mina reveals her guilt over her mother's death, telling him she has suffered for it all her life. Finally, the door opens, and the four of them stand by the mirror, hoping to convince the Watchers they belong. Madeline reveals that she was once a professor of history and mythology and volunteered to come to the forest, unaware of its dangers. She once encountered a person who looked just like her at sunset, realizing that the Watchers are an ancient shape-shifting species. Just then, Daniel finds a hidden hatch in the floor. They descend, discovering a well-equipped shelter. Mina turns on an old computer, finding records from Professor Rory Kilmartin. In 1979, he discovered this wonderland and began studying the Watchers, using lonely locals to build his sanctuary and experiment on them. One day, he encountered a Watcher disguised as a red-haired girl who, unlike the others, seemed different. He locked her in a cage, thinking she might be a fairy, and attempted communication. The girl occasionally transformed into a long-armed creature but obeyed him. Over time, they grew close. Eventually, the professor decided to leave, planning to follow the birds to his boat and escape. In his last recording, gunshots are heard as he ascends, followed by silence. Realizing it's their last night, CR and Daniel dance, though Daniel is tense about leaving. CR offers him comfort. The next day, they follow the signs in Mina's parrot, eventually reaching a tunnel covered by a massive stone disc. Madeline explains it's an ancient prison for the fairy race, who once lived harmoniously with humans but are now hostile, bound by magic to keep their distance. After a full day of walking, dusk falls, and they despair at not finding the professor's boat. Daniel believes he sees John and approaches, but it's a Watcher who kills him. Madeline, Mina, and CR row downriver, returning to civilization. Later, Mina visits the professor's university, destroying his files and discovering records that verify the existence of fairies and hybrid children. That evening, she goes to CR's house, revealing that Madeline was actually the professor's deceased wife, a unique fairy capable of appearing by day. When the professor killed her, she impersonated him to escape back to society. Just then, a car pulls up and the real CR arrives. The CR Mina was speaking with turns out to be a fairy, who knocks Mina unconscious and assumes different forms. The fairy explains that, like other species, they want to live freely but are forced underground by human hatred. Mina pleads, insisting that she is a hybrid and that others may be too, arguing against humanity's oppression of fairies. The fairy softens and flies away. Mina revives CR, later meeting her twin sister Lucy, and finally forgiving herself for her mother's death. She recounts her experiences, claiming to still see Madeline, and her niece shows her a drawing of herself with Darwin. Outside, a strange red-haired girl watches their house,